Please comment where you are watching in the world, and kindly subscribe to us. It was late April when everything changed, one of those soft, golden afternoons when the world seemed determined to convince you everything would work out in the end. I never expected a casual relationship to unravel in such a bizarre, unsettling way. But maybe spring, with its deceptive warmth and sudden storms, was the perfect metaphor for how Nick swept into my life and left it forever marked. I'd always liked spring in Nashville. The city came alive with cherry blossoms lining West End Avenue, cafes opening their patios again, and music spilling out of every open window in the Gulch. The world woke up, shaking off winter's gloom, and for a little while, anything felt possible. It was in that hopeful mood I first met Nick. I ran a small bookstore in East Nashville, tucked away near the Five Points area. A cozy, quiet place named Novel Idea, filled with worn chairs, stacks of novels, and regular customers who lingered over coffee. My life was calm, predictable even, exactly how I liked it. Then one spring afternoon, Nick walked in. Sunlight streaming through the windows illuminated his dark hair and tattoos snaking up both arms, vibrant colors peeking out from beneath his sleeves. His confident stride and casual smile made him impossible to ignore. Noticing my gaze, he grinned warmly, leaning casually against the checkout counter. "You must be Cassie," he said, extending a tattooed hand. "I am," I replied, cautiously amused. "Have we met?" "Nope. But your assistant Beth recommended you," he explained. "I'm Nick. I just opened the tattoo parlor down the block. Thought I'd introduce myself." I smiled politely, intrigued despite myself. We chatted easily for a few minutes. He mentioned his move from Austin, his passion for art, his excitement about East Nashville's creativity. Something about his openness was appealing, refreshing even. Before he left, Nick turned back, grinning playfully. "Hey Cassie, maybe I'll convince you to get your first tattoo one day." I laughed lightly, shaking my head. Not a chance. Yet somehow, despite my initial hesitation, we started spending time together. It began as coffee breaks at Bongo Java, walks in Shelby Bottoms Park, and occasional dinners at Mas Tacos Por Favor. It was casual, comfortable, and surprisingly easy. Nick's energy brought a vibrant contrast to my quiet routine. But as weeks passed, something subtle shifted. Our conversations grew deeper, his laughter warmer, and his gestures became more intimate. In mid-May, during one of Nashville's sudden rainstorms, we sat sheltered under the awning at Barista Parlor, sipping coffee as rain pounded the pavement. He reached over suddenly, tracing gentle circles across my palm, his eyes intense. "You're special, Cassie," he murmured softly. "I've never met anyone like you." Something about the sincerity of his voice warmed me, even as it stirred unease. I wasn't ready for intensity, especially from Nick, whose spontaneity already made me cautious. But I brushed aside the worry, enjoying the gentle warmth of his touch and the soft whispers of rain. A week later, on another perfect spring day, Nick appeared at the bookstore, buzzing with excitement. It was unusually busy, customers browsing quietly, sunlight filling the cozy space. Nick leaned casually against the counter, his grin mischievous. "I have something special to show you tonight," he whispered, his eyes dancing with excitement. "Should I be worried?" I teased gently, ignoring the quiet voice of caution within me. "You'll see," he said mysteriously, turning to leave. "Come by the shop after closing. You won't regret it." Intrigued but wary, I arrived later at his studio, Iron and Ink Tattoos, just after sunset. The shop was empty, the air fragrant with disinfectant and ink. Nick stood beside his chair, grinning broadly, his eyes sparkling mischievously. "What's going on?" I asked nervously, already sensing something unusual. Without a word, he slowly rolled up his sleeve, revealing his forearm. My stomach tightened sharply at the fresh ink, delicate script spelling out my initials, CLH, boldly etched into his skin. "Surprise," he said softly, his voice suddenly vulnerable. "I wanted something permanent. Something to show how serious I am about you." Shock held me speechless. Permanent? Serious? We'd only been seeing each other casually for a few weeks, barely a month. My heartbeat quickened uncomfortably, panic fluttering in my chest. "Oh, Nick, I finally managed. Why would you do this?" His smile faltered slightly, confusion clouding his expression. "I thought you'd love it. Isn't this romantic?" "Romantic?" I echoed weakly, trying desperately to find gentle words. "Nick, this feels too soon. We've barely started dating. It's just, I wasn't expecting something so permanent." His expression shifted rapidly from confusion to hurt. His arm dropped heavily to his side, disappointment clear in his eyes. The once playful sparkle dimmed abruptly. "I thought you felt it too," he murmured, quietly wounded. "That this was special, real." "It is special," I said softly, stepping closer, trying to soothe his hurt feelings without encouraging more intensity. "But this tattoo, it's just too much, Nick. It scares me." For several painful moments, we stood silently in the quiet studio, tension thickening the air. Nick's posture stiffened, his shoulders heavy with disappointment. "I guess I misunderstood," he finally said bitterly. "I thought you'd appreciate it." "Nick," I began gently, reaching out instinctively. But he pulled away sharply, eyes distant now. "It's fine, Cassie," he interrupted curtly. "Forget it." Afterward, our interactions turned awkward, strained. I struggled with guilt, unsure how to repair the fragile bond his impulsive tattoo had cracked. But something between us had permanently shifted. The ease we once shared was replaced by an uncomfortable silence. As spring shifted towards summer, Nick avoided me completely. I occasionally glimpsed him walking briskly past my shop, his gaze averted. Then one day, I saw him with a bandaged arm, clearly covering fresh work. My heart sank. A quick check of his Instagram confirmed my suspicion. He'd covered the tattoo of my initials, replacing it with dark shading, intricate patterns masking what he'd once proudly displayed. That night, alone in my quiet bookstore, sadness enveloped me. It wasn't just about the tattoo, but about how quickly feelings can blossom and fade, especially when forced into premature permanence. Nick had meant well, but his impulsive gesture revealed a gulf between us, a mismatch of timing, emotion, and expectation. Weeks later, near the end of spring, I found myself strolling along West End Avenue again. Cherry blossoms, once vibrant, had faded, petals scattered on the sidewalks, a quiet reminder of spring's brief, beautiful illusions. Relationships, like seasons, often promised more permanence than reality delivered. Looking back, it amazes me how the simple act of cooking dinner could reveal so much about someone's true nature. I never imagined that a carefully prepared meal could become the catalyst for seeing the cracks in a relationship, let alone my own self-worth. But then maybe that's exactly what relationships do, reveal truths we never intended to find. When I first met Sarah, it was early September in Chicago, the air crisp and inviting. Autumn was beginning to show itself on tree-lined streets near Lincoln Park, a perfect backdrop for romance. The sidewalks were covered in fallen leaves, crunching gently beneath our shoes as we wandered the neighborhood together, conversation flowing easily. Sarah was charming, intelligent, and had a smile that made the busy city streets feel softer. She was a graduate student at Northwestern, pursuing literature, while I worked remotely as a software developer from my cozy apartment near Fullerton Avenue. Our lives fit comfortably together, blending effortlessly into shared routines. From our first date at a small Thai restaurant on Halsted, we quickly bonded over our love of food. Cooking had always been my passion, a way to relax, express myself, and create something meaningful. Sarah enjoyed it too, though her tastes were simpler. Soon, dinner at my apartment became our favorite tradition, an intimate way to end the day together. At first, Sarah praised my cooking openly, enthusiastically. She complimented my creativity, my attention to detail, and the ease with which I whipped up dishes. Homemade pasta, carefully braised short ribs, fresh salads sprinkled with herbs from the farmer's market. She called me a natural, smiling fondly as we shared meals by candlelight, autumn shadows dancing gently on my apartment walls. But as autumn turned to winter, something subtle shifted. Sarah's enthusiasm began to cool. Her compliments, once frequent and genuine, became rare. Instead, her feedback turned critical, though always delivered quietly, almost casually. She'd taste a dish, pause thoughtfully, then make a small suggestion, an extra pinch of salt, a little less rosemary, maybe cook the pasta just a bit longer. At first, I welcomed her suggestions, grateful to learn. After all, constructive feedback was helpful. But as days passed into weeks, the criticisms grew more pointed. She'd sigh, pushing food around her plate, disappointment clear in her eyes. Soon, the suggestions were replaced by comparisons, unfavorable ones. One frigid evening in mid-December, after I carefully prepared seared salmon with lemon dill sauce, Sarah hesitated before tasting it, her eyes distant. "My ex Adam used to make the best salmon," she sighed quietly, almost nostalgically. "Honestly, you'd love his version. Perfectly crisp, always tender." I forced a polite smile, ignoring the uneasy knot forming in my chest. "Well, maybe I'll get it right next time," I said lightly, masking my discomfort. She nodded absently, her attention already elsewhere. As winter wore on, Sarah's comparisons to Adam became more frequent. It wasn't just salmon. Everything I cooked seemed to pale in comparison. The perfectly grilled steaks at Adam's apartment, the flawless chicken risotto Adam used to serve, the homemade pizza dough Adam made effortlessly. Each mention chipped away quietly at my confidence, leaving me second-guessing my skills, my worth. It wasn't only about cooking anymore. The criticism slowly seeped into other aspects of our relationship. My clothes, my music choices, even the way I organized my apartment, all subtly compared to Adam, always falling short. I felt increasingly inadequate, striving endlessly to match an ideal I'd never met, unable to understand why my efforts never seemed enough. By late February, Chicago was bitterly cold. Snow piled along Fullerton Avenue, matching the chill settling between Sarah and me. I'd grown weary, my enthusiasm for cooking replaced by anxiety. Dinner, once joyful, now felt like a performance, one I inevitably failed. Yet, despite my frustration, I wasn't ready to give up. I still cared for Sarah deeply, hoping somehow I could bridge the gap between her expectations and my reality. One particularly icy evening in March, I decided to try again. Determined to create something perfect, I spent hours preparing chicken stir-fry, carefully balancing flavors: fresh ginger, soy sauce, garlic, bright vegetables, crisp and vibrant. The aroma filled my apartment, comforting and hopeful. Sarah arrived just as I finished, the apartment warm from cooking. She smiled briefly, the familiar skepticism flickering briefly in her eyes. We sat quietly, tension lingering as we began eating. She took one bite, pausing thoughtfully, her expression unreadable. I watched carefully, hope and anxiety twisting tightly in my chest. Finally, she sighed softly. "It's fine," she murmured dismissively. "But Adam made something similar. His was incredible, flavorful, balanced perfectly. I wish you could have tasted it." A strange, cold clarity washed over me. It wasn't about my cooking. It never had been. Sarah was holding me hostage to memories of a past relationship, comparing me unfairly, using Adam's supposed perfection to undermine my confidence. The realization was painful, but also empowering. I had to know for certain. The next evening, I prepared the same dish again, the exact stir-fry. This time, however, I placed it into takeout containers, presenting it as a special delivery from a new restaurant in Lincoln Park. When Sarah arrived, I smiled easily, handing her chopsticks and casually mentioning I'd picked up dinner instead. We began eating silently. I waited patiently, heart pounding, watching her expression closely. Sarah's eyes widened instantly, genuine pleasure lighting her face. "Oh my God, Liam, this is amazing," she exclaimed, delighted. "Where did you find this?" "New place down the street," I lied carefully. "Glad you like it." She nodded enthusiastically. "Honestly, this is as good as Adam's, maybe even better. See, if you cooked like this, there'd be nothing to complain about." The quiet triumph I felt quickly turned to sadness. My cooking hadn't changed, only her perception had. Sarah's praise confirmed what I feared. She hadn't been criticizing my dishes, but rather my value itself. The problem was deeper, hidden behind comparisons, subtle put-downs, and impossible expectations. Slowly, calmly, I placed my chopsticks down, meeting her gaze directly. "Sarah," I began carefully, "I need you to know something. This meal, I cooked it." Her expression shifted from delight to confusion, then anger. "What are you talking about?" "I made this. It's exactly the same stir-fry I made last night. The only difference is you thought someone else made it," I explained quietly. "Why can't you see that?" Sarah stared at me silently, anger flickering briefly before fading into quiet realization. I guess I didn't realize," she whispered, her voice trailing off uncertainly. "I don't think it's about the food," I continued gently. "It never was. You keep comparing me to Adam, setting expectations I'll never meet. And I'm tired, Sarah. Tired of never feeling good enough." She didn't argue, just sat quietly, her eyes avoiding mine. Finally, softly, she spoke. "I didn't realize I was doing that." "But you did," I said calmly. "And it hurt. Every single time." Sarah didn't respond, simply gathered her things quietly, preparing to leave. There were no apologies, no attempts at resolution, only silence as the weight of our relationship crumbled around us. I can still remember the exact moment everything unraveled, the quiet hum of chatter, the clink of silverware, and the warm, familiar aroma of garlic and basil drifting from the restaurant's kitchen. It was early May, a gentle spring evening in Charleston, South Carolina. The city felt alive, magnolias in bloom, streets buzzing softly with tourists and locals savoring the season's comfortable warmth. It should have been perfect. Stefan had invited me to dinner that evening, casually mentioning he wanted to celebrate something special. He wouldn't tell me what it was, only hinting mysteriously and promising a surprise. I arrived at Fig, the chic, upscale spot on Meeting Street, a favorite of ours, where we'd shared intimate conversations over fresh seafood, sipping crisp Sauvignon Blanc while losing track of time. As usual, I arrived first, waiting quietly in the softly lit dining room, the air filled with the murmur of conversations and faint jazz music. I felt relaxed, happy even. Stefan had become an important part of my life, someone I trusted, cared for deeply. He was charming, confident, always impeccably dressed. A successful real estate developer, he traveled often between Charleston and Atlanta, his life filled with meetings, events, and endless networking. But somehow, amidst the chaos, we had carved out a quiet space for ourselves, comfortable, intimate, uncomplicated. At least, that's what I thought. That night, something immediately felt different when he arrived. Stefan stepped through the door, sharply dressed as always, but his posture unusually rigid, his expression tense. He paused near the entrance, scanning the room uneasily, his dark eyes narrowing slightly. I waved softly, catching his gaze. He hesitated briefly, then walked quickly toward me, forcing a strained smile. "Everything okay?" I asked softly, noticing immediately the stiffness in his shoulders, the unease lingering behind his practiced charm. "Of course," he replied quickly, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "Just a stressful day. But I'm glad you're here." I wanted to believe him, ignoring the quiet voice whispering unease in the back of my mind. He sat carefully, glancing again around the restaurant, his focus briefly lingering on a table tucked near the window, his face suddenly pale. "What's wrong?" I asked quietly, following his gaze, confused. He shifted uncomfortably, shaking his head. "Nothing. I thought I saw someone I knew. Just distracted." I studied him carefully, sensing something deeper. Stefan had always been confident, unflappable. This sudden unease was unlike him. Before I could press further, our server appeared, cheerful and oblivious. We ordered drinks, though Stefan seemed oddly hesitant, distracted. As the server walked away, I glanced back toward the table Stefan had stared at earlier, curiosity nagging quietly. My gaze landed immediately on a family seated comfortably, a woman, elegant and poised, 2 children beside her, laughing softly as they shared bread. Something about them felt strangely familiar, though I couldn't place why. I glanced again at Stefan, startled by his suddenly pale expression, his eyes still fixed nervously on that table. "Stefan, do you know them?" I asked gently, sensing tension radiating from him. He hesitated painfully, his voice suddenly tight, barely audible. "Elise, listen, maybe we should leave." "Why?" I pressed softly, confused now. "Who are they?" Before he could reply, the woman at the table turned slightly, her face visible under soft lighting. Recognition struck me sharply, my pulse quickening. I'd seen her before, in photos Stefan shared casually, framed images in his Atlanta apartment he had quickly dismissed as family photos. My chest tightened painfully, breath suddenly shallow. "Stefan, who is she?" His expression shifted quickly, panic, regret, shame all flickering rapidly behind carefully guarded eyes. Finally, softly, he whispered words that shattered everything. "Elise, that's my wife." Shock rippled through me, icy and numbing. "Your wife?" My voice trembled painfully, disbelief thickening my throat. Stefan nodded slowly, eyes avoiding mine. "She wasn't supposed to be here. They came early from Atlanta." My thoughts spun wildly, fragments of conversations, memories, promises unraveling instantly. Stefan was married. With children. A life I knew nothing about. A secret carefully hidden, now abruptly exposed. "How long?" I whispered, barely able to speak. "How long have you been married?" He hesitated painfully, sighing softly. 12 years. The words landed brutally, betrayal sharp and overwhelming. 12 years, a lifetime shared secretly behind my back. Shame washed over me, embarrassment mixing painfully with heartbreak. Stefan's wife laughed gently across the room, unaware of us, oblivious to the quiet devastation unfolding mere tables away. I suddenly felt trapped, suffocated by the truth exposed under restaurant lights. "Did she know?" I finally asked bitterly, eyes stinging painfully. "Did she know about me?" He shook his head quickly. "No. Elise, it was never supposed to be like this. I swear." "Supposed to be?" Anger surged sharply, raw and painful. "You mean you planned to deceive me indefinitely?" "No," Stefan insisted weakly. I planned to tell you eventually, when the time was right. Time? I laughed bitterly, disbelief coloring my voice sharply. There's no right time to reveal you've been lying to me this entire relationship, Stefan. You have a family, a life you hid deliberately. How can you justify this? I can't, he admitted softly, defeated. But it wasn't about deceiving you, Elise. I care about you deeply. I wanted this to work. I thought I could handle both lives. Both lives? My voice broke painfully. You never gave me a choice, Stefan. You lied. Repeatedly. Deliberately. He fell silent, shameful, unable to defend himself further. My vision blurred slightly, tears of humiliation and betrayal welling sharply. Please, Elise, Stefan whispered desperately. Let's talk about this somewhere else. No, I said firmly, my voice strengthening sharply. I'm done talking. You've said enough. Gathering my things quickly, I stood shakily, heart aching deeply. Stefan watched helplessly, expression filled with regret, but made no move to stop me. Quietly, painfully, I left him sitting there, alone with his secrets now exposed. Outside, Charleston felt suddenly unfamiliar, foreign even. The warm spring night felt cruelly deceptive now, laughter from passing couples echoing hollowly. Walking slowly toward the Battery, tears finally spilled quietly down my cheeks. How had I missed something so obvious? Had there been signs I ignored, clues hidden beneath Stefan's carefully crafted charm? Days passed painfully, memories re-examined obsessively. Stefan attempted apologies, desperate explanations, calls unanswered, texts unread. I avoided him completely, needing distance from the deception. Eventually, whispers spread among mutual acquaintances. Stefan's double life unraveled spectacularly, his wife confronting him, demanding explanations. Stefan's carefully maintained image crumbled publicly, exposing the depth of his deception. Friends expressed shock, sympathy offered awkwardly, embarrassment lingering. Months later, Charleston eventually regained comfort. The hurt softened gradually, replaced by quiet resilience. Stefan faded from my life, his presence replaced by lessons painfully learned. Spring in Savannah has always had a gentle charm, the kind that promises new beginnings, urging you to believe that anything is possible. Magnolia blossoms unfold in the squares, draping branches in delicate white petals, their fragrance softly mingling with the warm breeze off the river. It was during one of those tender April days that Nora walked into my life, quietly captivating, mysterious, and unknowingly ready to test every boundary of trust one thought I understood. I had moved to Savannah from Boston 3 years earlier, trading harsh winters and corporate life for softer seasons and a slower pace. I settled quickly into a restored townhouse near Forsyth Park, opening a small art gallery on Broughton Street, enjoying a life that balanced work and leisure. Savannah had welcomed me gently, and I embraced its quiet rhythms gratefully. Meeting Nora had felt similarly easy, almost destined. She wandered into my gallery on a warm spring afternoon, sunlight filtering through the large windows, illuminating her dark hair in a soft halo. She studied each painting carefully, moving slowly from one piece to another with quiet appreciation. Eventually, our conversation sparked naturally, moving from art to personal interests. She was graceful, thoughtful, and reserved in a way that intrigued me immediately. Over weeks, we explored Savannah together, picnics beneath blooming magnolias, dinners at rooftop restaurants overlooking the river, evenings spent strolling historic streets softly lit by gas lamps. Nora revealed little about her past, keeping conversations carefully vague, though I attributed her quiet reserve simply to shyness. I was patient, confident trust would grow naturally with time. By late spring, Nora had become a constant presence in my life. Comfortable yet always slightly guarded, she seemed to hold herself just out of reach, careful not to reveal too much. Yet I was content, believing patience would eventually win her trust. Then, one warm May evening, attending a friend's art exhibition near City Market, something changed sharply, suddenly revealing secrets Nora had carefully hidden. The gallery was crowded, filled with familiar faces mingling beneath softly lit paintings. Nora lingered near me, comfortable in social settings, but occasionally glancing nervously toward the entrance. Eventually, she excused herself briefly, stepping outside for air. A moment later, my friend Hannah approached cautiously, her expression hesitant. "Hey, Will, can I talk to you privately for a second?" Curious, I followed her quietly outside, stepping away from the chatter inside. Hannah glanced nervously toward Nora, who stood further away, distracted. Will, how long have you been seeing Nora? She asked quietly. About 2 months, I replied carefully, sensing something uneasy in her voice. Why? Hannah sighed softly, eyes worried. I wasn't sure if I should say anything, but I know her. We went to college together in Atlanta. There's something you should know. I tensed slightly, apprehension quietly building. What? Nora has a fiancé, Hannah explained softly, regret clear in her voice. At least, she did as recently as last fall. They'd been together for years, engaged, planning their wedding. Then one day she disappeared. No explanation, no warning. Her fiancé, David, was devastated. Nobody knew where she went. Shock rippled sharply through me, disbelief quickly replaced by confusion. Are you sure it's her? Hannah nodded slowly. Positive. We were friends, Will. I know her. The way she vanished was sudden, no closure, nothing. I glanced sharply toward Nora, heart racing painfully. A fiancé, someone left behind without explanation. It didn't fit the Nora I thought I knew, yet explained her guarded nature, her careful distance. As I approached her carefully, she seemed startled by my sudden seriousness. Nora, we need to talk, I said gently, my voice cautious. Did you leave someone behind in Atlanta? Her eyes widened sharply, panic briefly flickering. She hesitated painfully before finally speaking softly. Who told you? It doesn't matter, I replied gently. But is it true? Were you engaged? She sighed deeply, nodding reluctantly. Yes, David. But it wasn't what you think. Nora, you disappeared without explanation. I interrupted quietly, sadness evident. He deserved more than silence. It was complicated, she insisted weakly. David was controlling. It was suffocating, I felt trapped. Leaving was the only way. I believe you, I replied carefully. But you should have trusted me enough to say something. Secrets always surface eventually. Her eyes softened briefly, regret evident. I was afraid you'd judge me. Leaving him the way I did, I wasn't proud. I just wanted to start over. Secrets don't create fresh starts, I reminded her gently. They create barriers. She nodded silently, understanding the quiet pain in my voice. Trust had fractured softly but sharply between us. Nora's hidden past revealed deeper wounds, fear, regret, an inability to trust openly. The intimacy we'd built suddenly felt fragile, uncertain. Days following were tense, conversations strained. Nora withdrew quietly, guilt evident. Meanwhile, I wrestled with uncertainty, torn between sympathy and disappointment. Trust, once easily given, now felt cautious, guarded. Could Nora ever truly be open, honest? Eventually, late one evening in early June, she came to my townhouse quietly, her expression vulnerable. Will, I understand if you can't forgive me. But I want you to know, I've reached out to David. We spoke. It was painful, difficult, but it brought closure we both needed. I can't change what I did, but I can try to heal it. Her honesty surprised me gently, relief mingling quietly with lingering caution. Nora, I don't expect perfection, but I need honesty, real honesty. That's the only way forward. I know, she whispered softly, eyes sincere. No more secrets. Summer arrived slowly, warmth deepening Savannah's charm, magnolias fading gently into thicker, brighter blossoms. Nora and I moved forward cautiously, trust rebuilding carefully. Our conversations deepened, vulnerabilities shared openly. We navigated tensions thoughtfully, boundaries respected clearly. By midsummer, quiet intimacy returned, stronger precisely because trust had once been fractured. Nora's hidden past no longer created distance. It invited understanding, empathy. Savannah's gentle rhythm softened tensions, encouraging healing. One warm evening in late July, walking quietly beneath live oaks draped in Spanish moss, Nora squeezed my hand gently. Spring's fragile, isn't it? She murmured thoughtfully. Beautiful but temporary. Like trust, easily broken, difficult to repair. I nodded gently, understanding her metaphor clearly. But sometimes fragility makes things more precious. Trust rebuilt carefully becomes stronger precisely because we know its value. She smiled softly, the quiet understanding passing warmly between us. Nora's secrets had challenged us deeply, yet also revealed truths worth knowing, about honesty, forgiveness, quiet resilience. Eventually, Savannah bloomed again into another spring, magnolias unfolding gently beneath warm skies, promising fresh starts once more. Nora and I moved forward cautiously but confidently, understanding deeply trust's fragility and strength. Story 8. I've told this story before, but never in full detail. Met a guy on Tinder. He was fairly attractive, well-spoken, intelligent, and polite. Said he was looking to date someone long-term with no expectation of getting serious, not cohabitating, marriage, etc. I was looking for the same, so we agreed to meet. He suggested a wine bar downtown and hey, his friend's band is playing. I figured this is good, low-key first meeting, no expectations, and if I don't like him, downtown is busy enough at night that I feel safe leaving alone. So we meet at the wine bar, and it's clear he's been there a while, as he's well into his first drink. I get a sidearm hug of greeting, and he shows me around the place. I'd never been. It becomes clear he's a regular, as everyone seems to know him, and it's also clear at that point that I'm the youngest person in the room, which is a feat since I'm well over 40. Several people ask him if I'm his girlfriend, to which he quickly explains he doesn't know me. Not a lie, but his tone implies he doesn't see me as GF material. Then he suggests we walk over to the parking structure nearby, because it has really great views. Sounds weird, but it's actually true. Pretty common spot for people to take sunset pics or modeling pics. While we're up there, we're talking as he takes his photos, and that's when the conversation got awkward. He asks me about myself, and every detail that I give, he has to one-up. I was a good student in school, so suddenly he graduated 2 years early. I joke that one of my college professors wanted to me apply for Mensa. He tells me he's been a member since he was 6, and he doesn't think I can pass the exams. I mention I was excited I signed my first publication contract with a really small publisher. He wrote a bestseller with his dad when he was 5. I'm brushing up the Spanish I learned in HS. He speaks 4 languages. I say I want to visit Europe one day. He's traveled all over. And while any or all of that could be true, I feel like I'm being put down at every turn. We go back to the wine bar, where he again greets people he knows and disclaims knowing me. He gets us a table, and I order a glass of wine. He excuses himself, saying he sees someone, and he's just going to say hello. While he's gone, several of his male friends start hitting on me, to the point that the female bartender has to shoo them away. The few times he pops back to the table, it's to get another sip of his drink and tell whatever friend of his is hitting me that no, we're not on a date, and no, they're not interrupting. Then his friend's band shows up, and they start asking him if he's going to sit in that night. He demurs, and they push until he agrees to at least help them load in and set up. I'm pretty open musically, and there's very few genres I am not a big fan of. Of course, this band plays one of those exact genres, improvisational jazz. And after a couple of songs, my date excuses himself again to join them on stage. Does he scat or sing? No, he does free association spoken word poetry. It's all political, and everyone is snapping their fingers for his alter ego. This went on for over an hour. By then, I'd been there for over 2 hours, and he spent maybe 20 minutes of that with me. The bartender comes over and asks if it's our first date. When I say it is, she sucks air between her teeth and tells me this is pretty common for him. She pours me another glass of wine and tells me that one is on her, so that I can at least enjoy part of my night. I finish my second glass, thank the bartender, and ask for my tab. As I'm signing the CC receipt, he finally appears out of nowhere and asks if I'm leaving. At this point, I'm disappointed that I dressed up and shaved my legs for this shit show. So I say yes, and he offers to walk me to my car since it's now dark out. I'm hesitant because I don't want him to know my car, but he is right that after dark, that same parking structure is way more sketchy, so I accept. When we get to my car, he tells me what a great time he had and asks if I had fun. I make some non-committal, but not insulting response, and he hugs me, then stands by and waits for me to get in my car and get us started before he walks away. Like the only time all night he had any form of gentlemanly behavior. At this point, I've written this off as a learning experience and plan not to see him again. After a week of radio silence, he texts me that he thinks we have real chemistry, but he doesn't see me as someone he could commit to being monogamous with, but he'd like to add me to his circle of regular, casual partners. Deleted and blocked. Second set of stories to add from my experience. It's a toss-up between these two. They happened within months of each other, to which makes it even better. I never thought I'd be the kind of guy who fell for a scheme, especially something that seemed so obviously shady in hindsight. But sometimes people come into your life and blind you to reason, making even the most cautious person ignore all the red flags waving desperately in front of them. Natalie was exactly that kind of person. I'd always been careful. As an accountant living in Denver, Colorado, my entire career revolved around precision, detail, and skepticism. My life was stable, comfortable, but admittedly predictable. Each morning, I'd take the same route from my apartment near Union Station, grab coffee at Little Owl, then head to my downtown office on 17th Street. Evenings were usually spent running along the Cherry Creek Trail, dinner at home, and weekends wandering bookstores like Tattered Cover. Predictable, until Natalie walked into my world. We met at a networking event hosted at the Maven Hotel near Coors Field. Natalie stood out immediately, effortlessly working the room with a charisma I'd rarely encountered. Confident, witty, and strikingly attractive, she drew people in, myself included. When we finally spoke, she listened intently, her eyes focused solely on me as though no one else mattered. Natalie told me about her background, a series of successful ventures, an MBA from UCLA, experience with tech startups in Palo Alto. She seemed legitimate, experienced, and genuine. She had a spark, a sense of adventure I desperately craved in my mundane routine. Soon, we found ourselves spending evenings at Avani Food and Beverage, talking business and sharing laughs, blending personal and professional lives effortlessly. Then, one afternoon over lunch at Root Down, Natalie revealed her next big idea, a wellness product that was poised to revolutionize the health industry. At first, it seemed credible enough, premium supplements, scientifically tested, backed by enthusiastic investors. Natalie's excitement was contagious. She painted a compelling picture of a booming market, easy profits, and most importantly, the chance to build something meaningful together. It's not about the money, she'd always say convincingly, eyes shining. It's about making a difference. Despite my instincts, I found myself intrigued. I liked her confidence, her passion, her vision. But what really hooked me was Natalie herself, how effortlessly she inspired trust, weaving her dream until it became ours. A month later, she invited me to a gathering at an upscale co-working space in Reno, filled with young professionals eager to change the world, or at least their own financial situations. Natalie stood in front, magnetic as always, detailing the business model, recruit distributors, create a sales team, earn commissions. It sounded simple, almost too simple. A voice in my head whispered that it might be a pyramid scheme, but Natalie's assurance drowned out my doubt. Pyramids are illegal, she laughed softly, noticing my skepticism. This is direct sales. Everyone benefits. I ignored the nagging feeling in my gut and eventually invested, not small amounts either. At first, it seemed to work. I brought in some friends who were equally excited. Sales started rolling, checks arrived regularly, and Natalie was thrilled. We celebrated successes at chic restaurants in Lodo, toasting champagne at Rioja, believing we'd cracked the code. But soon, cracks appeared. Sales slowed. The products were overpriced, impossible to sell without recruiting more people. My friends struggled, their enthusiasm dwindling, frustrations mounting. Money that had initially trickled in stopped flowing altogether. Instead, debt started piling up. Stress gnawed at me nightly, sleep becoming increasingly elusive. When I brought my concerns to Natalie, she brushed them aside, a dismissive wave of her hand. "You're panicking too soon," she'd reassure me calmly. "Trust the process. Success takes patience." Patience, I learned, was her go-to phrase, an empty promise designed to string me along. Deep down, I knew I'd been played, but admitting it meant acknowledging I'd ignored every logical instinct, blinded by Natalie's charisma. Eventually, reality hit hard. A news story broke on local Denver stations, exposing the venture as precisely what I'd feared, a thinly veiled pyramid scheme, already under investigation. My heart sank, panic twisting in my gut. I confronted Natalie, frantic and angry, demanding answers. She barely reacted, calmly sipping espresso at Crema Coffee House as I laid out my ruined finances, destroyed friendships, and shattered trust. Her response was cold, distant, a bitter truth she no longer cared to hide. "Ethan, you knew the risks," she said dismissively. "It's your own fault you believed it would be easy." The cruelty of her words stunned me into silence. She offered no apologies, no reassurance, just the cold truth. I'd been nothing but a means to an end. Natalie had gotten what she needed, my money, my connections, and now I was disposable. I watched her walk out calmly onto Larimer Street, leaving me stunned, betrayed, and financially devastated. In the weeks that followed, the damage became painfully clear. Friends I'd brought into the scheme distanced themselves, hurt and betrayed by my involvement. My carefully built reputation crumbled, leaving me ashamed, humiliated, and alone. The confident, cautious accountant had fallen spectacularly, his judgment completely compromised by blind trust. Natalie disappeared from Denver entirely. Her social media showed glimpses of a new life, San Diego beaches, Malibu sunsets. Proof she had moved on easily, untouched by the wreckage left behind. I, however, spent months piecing my life back together, wrestling with the painful realization that I'd let charisma override common sense. Yet, even in my darkest moments, something important became clear. Natalie's betrayal had exposed more than just a financial scam. It revealed a vulnerability within me, a willingness to ignore instincts in the face of charm and persuasion. I'm still rebuilding, slowly restoring trust with friends, settling debts, healing emotional wounds. Denver, once a city I adored without reservation, now carries bittersweet memories. I walk the streets differently now, more guarded, careful about who earns my trust. I never imagined something as trivial as a collection of vintage records could unravel everything I thought I knew about someone. But life has a way of bringing hidden tensions to the surface, especially when it comes to sharing things with someone you love. I moved to Austin 5 years ago, chasing a job as a graphic designer for a startup downtown. I settled quickly into a modest apartment in the trendy South Congress neighborhood, filled with local coffee shops, vintage boutiques, and a vibrant music scene. My life was simple but comfortable. Saturday mornings at Joe's Coffee, evenings catching shows at Antone's, weekends spent flipping through vinyl at Waterloo Records. That's how I met Mia. It was a humid Sunday afternoon, the Texas heat shimmering off the pavement outside Waterloo. I was browsing through classic rock albums when she stepped beside me, long auburn hair loosely braided, dark eyes scanning the covers intently. "Looking for something special?" I asked casually. Mia smiled, a bit shyly at first. "Always looking," she laughed softly. That afternoon we talked music, sharing stories over iced coffees at Bennu Coffee, realizing we had more in common than just vinyl records. Mia was witty, creative, and a free spirit who moved from Asheville, North Carolina, to pursue her love of photography. She was also unapologetically spontaneous, which was both charming and occasionally exhausting. But I liked that about her, at first. Our relationship moved quickly. Within 6 months, Mia practically lived at my place. I enjoyed having her there. She brought warmth and laughter to my quiet life. It seemed natural to share everything with her, my apartment, my groceries, my Netflix password, everything. Sharing became second nature. But soon, small things started to grate on me. Mia would borrow my camera gear without asking, help herself to my clothes, rearrange furniture without mentioning it. At first, I brushed it off, chalking it up to her creative impulses. It wasn't a big deal. Until it was. The real trouble started with my vinyl collection. I'd spent years carefully building it, each record carrying sentimental value. Limited editions from Amoeba Music in San Francisco, first pressings from Reckless Records in Chicago. They were more than music, they represented memories. One evening, after dinner at Hop Dottie Burger Bar, we returned to my place. Mia immediately went over to my shelf and pulled out a limited edition Bowie record, one I'd never even played, saving it for a special occasion. "Mind if I borrow this?" she asked casually, already sliding it into her bag. Sure," I replied hesitantly. She caught my uncertainty, pausing slightly. "I'll take good care of it," she said lightly, flashing a playful smile. I shrugged it off, not wanting to seem petty. After all, it was just a record, right? Days later, I spotted it on her coffee table. Unprotected, the sleeve creased, vinyl lying exposed, collecting dust. My heart dropped. When I gently confronted her, she laughed it off. "It's just a record, Alex. Relax." But it wasn't just a record, not to me. Things escalated quickly after that. Mia became increasingly comfortable taking whatever she pleased, ignoring my subtle hints about respecting boundaries. Books, clothing, even my carefully labeled camera lenses. She saw my hesitation as silly, even selfish. The tipping point came on a warm spring evening. I'd returned home after a stressful day, looking forward to unwinding by sorting through my vinyl. But something felt off the moment I stepped inside. The apartment felt rearranged, unsettled. My heart sank as I saw Mia, seated cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by stacks of my records. Sleeves lay scattered carelessly around her, vinyl piled haphazardly. She was cutting album covers, creating some sort of collage, destroying memories I'd spent years preserving. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice shaking. She looked up, scissors frozen mid-slice. "Oh hey, I'm working on an art piece. Your album art is perfect for this." Anger surged through me, sharp and hot. "Mia, those were mine. You didn't even ask." Her expression shifted from surprise to irritation. I didn't think I needed permission. We share everything, remember? Not like this, I said firmly. Not my records. She stood slowly, frustration flickering in her eyes. It's just stuff, Alex. You're overreacting. Something in me snapped. Without thinking, I stepped forward, gathered the ruined records, and walked straight out onto the balcony overlooking South Congress Avenue. Without hesitation, I dropped them into the dumpster below. They fell with a dull, painful thud. Mia stared at me, speechless. I felt strangely numb, standing there empty-handed, my chest tight with regret but also relief. That was petty, Mia finally whispered, her voice trembling slightly. Maybe, I admitted, meeting her gaze. But you can't just take what's mine and call it sharing. That wasn't yours to destroy. The silence that followed was deafening. Mia didn't apologize. She just turned away, gathering her things quietly. I guess we're not as compatible as I thought, she said coldly, finally breaking the silence. The following days felt empty and strange. Mia distanced herself, sending brief, curt messages whenever we spoke. I felt a mixture of guilt and sadness, but deep down, I knew I'd done what I needed to do. Sharing a life with someone didn't mean sacrificing your own boundaries or losing your sense of self. Eventually, we broke up quietly. Mia moved to East Austin, and we drifted apart. Friends occasionally asked what happened, and when I explained, some understood, others shrugged, saying, "It's just stuff." But it wasn't just stuff. It was about respect, respect for boundaries, respect for each other's histories, respect for what's personal. My records had only been the catalyst, revealing how different Mia and I truly were beneath the surface. Months passed, and eventually, I found myself at Waterloo Records again, quietly rebuilding my collection. I couldn't replace the memories lost, but I could move forward, choosing carefully who I allowed into my shared spaces. Austin remained my home, vibrant and comforting, but my experience with Mia had changed me. It taught me something important. Real love and intimacy aren't built by erasing boundaries. They're built by respecting them. Trust is a fragile thing, easily broken and difficult to mend. I had always known that relationships came with secrets, small mysteries hidden behind closed doors, quiet histories tucked neatly away. But I never imagined how unsettling it could feel to learn something entirely unexpected about someone you thought you knew. I met Julia in late June, at the beginning of a long, balmy California summer. Santa Monica buzzed with energy, sunlight bathed the beaches in gold, the Pacific stretching endlessly blue. It felt like the perfect place to fall in love, carefree and easy beneath open skies. Julia was strikingly beautiful, effortlessly confident, and full of warmth. She was an interior designer whose apartment on Ocean Avenue was filled with colorful art and sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. I worked as an architect in a firm downtown, spending days sketching sleek, modern homes for Hollywood clients. Our worlds aligned seamlessly, blending architecture and design, the perfect backdrop for romance. Together we explored the city, walking the pier at sunset, dinners at Kasha, Sunday mornings browsing fresh produce at the farmer's market. Everything was comfortable, peaceful even. Julia had a way of making every moment feel special, every small gesture meaningful. Yet there were subtle mysteries. Julia occasionally hinted at having moved from San Francisco for a fresh start, though she never explained why. Sometimes she would grow distant, thoughtful, gazing silently at the ocean, lost in memories she never shared. I respected her privacy, believing intimacy meant patience, not intrusion. I assumed trust would grow naturally, given time. Then came the party in late August, an event that would change everything. My old friend Mark hosted a sunset bonfire on the beach near Malibu, an end-of-summer gathering we attended each year. Friends chatted around the fire, music drifting softly as waves crashed gently nearby. The sky was painted shades of deep pink and purple, the kind of evening that felt perfectly Californian. Julia mingled effortlessly, her laughter bright, drawing people in. Watching her from a distance, I felt lucky, grateful even. Mark approached, beer in hand, smiling knowingly. "Seems serious," he teased lightly, nodding towards Julia. "Maybe," I replied, grinning sheepishly. "She's incredible." Mark hesitated slightly, his expression shifting uncertainly. "You know, I saw Julia earlier, thought she looked familiar." Then it hit me. "She used to work in San Francisco, right?" "Yeah, before she moved here," I confirmed, curious now. "Listen," Mark began quietly, clearly uncomfortable. "I don't want to stir things up, but I recognized her immediately. Julia used to dance at a club in San Francisco, a pretty well-known one. You knew that, right?" His words landed like stones, heavy and startling. A dancer? You mean like? Yeah, like that, Mark clarified gently. She was good, well-known even. She danced professionally, Daniel. I just figured she'd mentioned it. My chest tightened, uncertainty replacing comfort. Why hadn't Julia mentioned it? Not that her past profession mattered to me. It wasn't judgment I felt, just confusion. Julia had always seemed transparent, open, genuine. Why hide something significant? Seeing my expression, Mark placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. Hey, maybe she was just waiting for the right moment to tell you. It probably meant nothing. Yeah, I murmured distractedly. Maybe. But doubt lingered, gnawing at my thoughts. Suddenly, everything seemed uncertain. My easy trust began unraveling, replaced by quiet questions. Who's Julia, really? The evening continued, music and laughter fading into background noise. Julia approached eventually, smiling softly, sensing something off. Hey, everything okay? Julia. I began quietly, gently, determined not to sound accusing. Mark said he recognized you from San Francisco. Her smile faltered briefly, tension flickering behind her eyes. She seemed to understand instantly. Oh, he mentioned the club? Yeah, I replied softly. Why didn't you tell me? She sighed quietly, glancing towards the darkening ocean, thoughtful. Honestly, Daniel, I didn't think it mattered. It was a lifetime ago. I moved here to leave all that behind. I don't care what you did, I assured her gently. But why hide it? We're supposed to trust each other. It wasn't about hiding, Julia said defensively. It just wasn't something I wanted defining me. People hear that, and they make assumptions. But I'm not people, I reminded her quietly. I'm supposed to be different. She nodded slowly, clearly conflicted. I was going to tell you eventually. But how do you casually mention something like that? Hey Daniel, by the way. It's complicated. Silence stretched between us, waves breaking rhythmically nearby, tension palpable. I wish you'd trusted me enough to say something, I finally whispered, hurt evident in my voice. I thought I did, Julia replied softly. But maybe I was wrong. The drive home was quiet, unease lingering thickly. My apartment felt suddenly unfamiliar, the cozy intimacy replaced by awkwardness. Neither of us knew what to say, trapped between trust and disappointment. Days passed in strained silence, both waiting for something, an apology, an explanation, an acknowledgement. But nothing came. Julia pulled back slightly, reserved, wounded by my reaction. Meanwhile, I wrestled with my thoughts, unsure whether my feelings were justified or petty. Finally, we sat together on my balcony one evening, twilight turning the sky soft shades of purple. Julia spoke first, her voice hesitant. Maybe I was wrong to hide my past. But, Daniel, it was never about deceiving you. I was scared, ashamed even. Afraid you'd see me differently. I don't, I assured her gently. But relationships are built on honesty, Julia. I don't care what your past is. I care that you felt the need to hide it. Her eyes softened slightly, sadness evident. Maybe I should have trusted you. But trust goes both ways. You didn't exactly give me the benefit of the doubt either. You judged me instantly. Her words stung sharply, uncomfortable truth hidden beneath them. Maybe I had judged subtly, unintentionally. Trust was complicated, fragile, easily damaged by assumptions. We talked late into the night, both acknowledging our mistakes, our misunderstandings. Yet, despite apologies, something between us had irrevocably changed. The ease we once shared became cautious, wary even. Julia's hidden past had revealed vulnerabilities neither of us expected. Weeks later, Julia decided to return briefly to San Francisco, needing space, clarity. Distance felt necessary, though painful. I remained in Santa Monica, reflecting quietly, questioning my reactions, my own hidden judgments. Maybe Julia's secrets weren't the issue. Maybe my reaction was. Late one evening, I sat alone on the Santa Monica pier, watching the sunset's glow fade into darkness. Couples wandered happily nearby, unaware of complexities lurking beneath relationships' surfaces. Everyone carried secrets, quiet histories shaping who they became. Julia returned eventually, different but calmer. We agreed to start again slowly, rebuilding trust carefully. Her past became simply part of her story, not a source of shame, nor something to hide. I learned acceptance, patience, the importance of listening without judgment. It's funny how life always has a way of reminding you how little you really know about someone, especially someone you think you understand completely. That's exactly what happened when I met Lucy. At first, everything felt simple. It felt real. I had no idea I was just another strand in her carefully woven web. I'd moved to Seattle 3 years earlier, taking a cozy little loft on Capitol Hill. Life as a freelance photographer meant freedom. Coffee at Victrola, late-night ramen at Oink, wandering the streets capturing rain-streaked scenes that I later sold to travel magazines. My life was predictable in the best way, quietly adventurous and uncomplicated. That changed the day I walked into Elliott Bay Book Company on 10th Avenue, intending to pick up a new photography anthology. That's when I saw Lucy for the first time. She stood by the travel section, flipping through a guidebook on Iceland, her dark hair spilling carelessly over her shoulders, one eyebrow raised skeptically. Something about her presence was captivating, confident yet approachable. I remember walking over, casually suggesting the Reykjavik guide next to it. She glanced up at me, smiling playfully, and my carefully balanced life tilted. Within days, we met again at Optimism Brewery, swapping stories over craft beers until the staff gently suggested we leave at closing time. Lucy was a travel blogger, vibrant and effortlessly charming. She seemed to know everyone, always laughing, eyes sparkling as she shared tales of backpacking in Europe, festivals in Asia, and hidden beaches in South America. Her life sounded like a highlight reel, exciting yet somehow mysterious. Maybe that should have been my first clue, but I was too caught up to notice. Weeks quickly turned to months, and things were good. Our relationship stayed casual. Comfortable dates at Cary Park overlooking the skyline, street tacos at Tacos Chukis, and afternoons exploring Pike Place Market. Nothing heavy. It was easy, exactly how we both liked it. Or at least, how I thought she liked it. Then, one rainy afternoon at Café Allegro near the University of Washington, something happened that changed everything. Lucy was running late, and I sat quietly with my camera, mindlessly scrolling Instagram. A group of Lucy's acquaintances was huddled nearby, sipping coffee and gossiping quietly. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but one name caught my attention clearly. Lucy. She's still going through with it? One girl said quietly, disbelief evident in her voice. I honestly thought she'd change her mind. Well, the guy's already bought a ring, another responded, her voice low, tense. They booked a venue in Auckland months ago. Lucy says it's happening, no backing out now. My heart stuttered painfully in my chest. Auckland? Venue? Ring? They couldn't mean my Lucy. I listened closer, dread pooling in my stomach. The conversation continued in whispers, but I caught enough fragments to piece it together. Lucy had a fiancé in New Zealand, someone she'd met months before. They were getting married soon. It had been planned long before we met. She had never mentioned it to me, not once. Suddenly, the cafe felt suffocating, my pulse thundering in my ears. When Lucy finally walked in, soaked from the rain but still smiling brightly, I forced myself to pretend nothing was wrong. She leaned in for a kiss, but it felt hollow now, her laughter empty. I had trusted her, even admired her carefree independence, only to find myself caught in a secret I wasn't supposed to uncover. For days afterward, I wrestled with the truth. It seemed impossible. Maybe there was some misunderstanding, some other Lucy in Seattle with a similar story. I wanted desperately to believe I was wrong. Then came the moment that made everything painfully clear. Scrolling through Instagram one evening, alone in my Capitol Hill loft, a photo stopped me cold. Lucy, radiant and smiling, stood in front of Auckland's sparkling waterfront, her dark hair blowing gently in the wind. Beside her was a man I'd never seen, tall, rugged, grinning confidently. Counting down the days with you, the caption read, followed by a wedding hashtag. I felt like I'd been punched. My fingers trembled as I clicked deeper into her carefully curated feed, now seeing clearly what I had overlooked. Photos from New Zealand months earlier, vague but suggestive captions, cryptic comments from people I never knew existed. How had I missed all the signs? My phone buzzed suddenly, a text from Lucy. Miss you, let's grab sushi at Japanesa tomorrow. She was still playing this game, juggling her worlds so effortlessly it left me feeling dizzy and nauseous. I wanted to confront her, demand answers, but pride and fear tangled together inside me. Instead, I replied simply, "Can't tomorrow. Sorry." It felt weak, but I couldn't bring myself to face her just yet. Days stretched painfully slow, my mind replaying every moment we shared. What had I meant to her, if anything at all? A week later, another photo appeared, stopping my heart again. Lucy, standing on a white sand beach, turquoise waves lapping behind her. Her fiancé beside her, arms wrapped tightly around her waist. The caption read, "Forever starts now. Hashtag just married." I stared numbly at the screen. Married? The word echoed inside my skull, cold and relentless. It was over, and I'd never even had the courage to confront her. Lucy had simply moved on, stepping gracefully from one carefully planned life into another, leaving me tangled in her web. I didn't reach out again. I didn't know how. Instead, I quietly withdrew, deleting her number, unfollowing her feeds, cutting every invisible thread connecting us. Seattle felt lonelier afterward, my once comfortable routine shattered by unanswered questions and lingering self-doubt. Months later, as autumn rain swept across Capitol Hill, I sat quietly in Elliott Bay Books, absent-mindedly flipping through a photography anthology, the very one I'd intended to buy the day I met Lucy. In its pages, I found snapshots of distant places, people with lives entirely separate from mine. It reminded me how little we truly see of the stories unfolding around us. Lucy's web had trapped me briefly but completely, leaving scars hidden behind casual smiles and careful silences. Even now, when I cross paths with strangers in coffee shops or bookstores, I wonder what secrets they carry, what strands they quietly weave. Trust is delicate, easily broken, and impossible to fully restore once lost. Lucy taught me that, and while the bitterness of betrayal has softened over time, its lesson remains sharp. People can hide entire worlds behind smiles and laughter, carefully maintaining illusions until the truth finally surfaces. Seattle is still my home, still familiar, but something in me changed. I wander the city streets with a photographer's eyes, more observant now, recognizing that beneath every casual encounter might lie a carefully concealed truth. Each person we meet holds their own stories close, beautiful, painful, complex, and the boundaries between sincerity and deception are thinner than we ever dare to imagine. Lucy's web unraveled my trust, but in the process, it opened my eyes. I never thought something as simple as voicemails could unravel my entire life. I've always been the type to dismiss romantic gestures as cheesy or superficial, cute but unnecessary. That changed the day Lorelei walked into my classroom at Sunset Middle School in Portland, Oregon. It had been a rainy Tuesday afternoon, typical Portland gloom, and I was packing away sheet music after my last music class. The squeak of damp sneakers on the polished gym floor told me someone was there before I saw her. Lorelei stood quietly near the door, clutching a pile of books, a bashful smile on her face. She was the new librarian at Sunset Middle. Quiet, quirky, and the exact opposite of my usual type. I wasn't looking for anything serious, but something about her drew me in. Lorelei was different. Maybe it was the way she fumbled nervously with her glasses whenever she spoke, or the way she'd laugh a little too loud at my jokes. Whatever it was, it worked. Our first few weeks together were casual and comfortable. Coffee at Stumptown on Belmont Street, exploring Powell's books downtown. Easy, relaxed dates that never felt forced. Then came the voicemails. At first, they were innocent and charming. Lorelei would leave short messages about a funny thing that happened during her shift at the library, or just to remind me about our dinner plans at Screen Door on Burnside. I liked it. I wasn't used to someone thinking about me during the day, let alone reaching out to share little moments. It made me feel special in ways I hadn't felt in a long time. But soon, the voicemails began to pile up. At first, it was one every few days. Then it became one every single day. Sometimes 2 or 3 in a single afternoon. And they weren't just quick messages anymore. They began to stretch into minute-long monologues. Eventually, each voicemail lasted several minutes, then longer. I remember one rainy Saturday morning vividly. I just picked up a fresh cup of coffee from Blue Star Donuts in the Pearl District, walked back to my old Subaru parked on Everett Street, and saw my phone flashing 3 missed voicemails, all from Lorelei. I played them one after another as I drove home along Hawthorne Boulevard, my stomach nodding as each message grew longer, more intense. She talked about every detail of her day, the books she shelved, the students who visited her in the library, the mundane details of a faculty meeting. Then, she'd slip into how much she missed me, how she counted minutes until we'd meet again. She was earnest, sweet even, but something felt off. It was too much. My phone had become a digital diary of her day, every thought spilling over uncontrollably. At first, I shrugged it off. Maybe she was just lonely, I reasoned. She'd moved here from a small town in Minnesota, still adjusting to Portland's eccentric ways. But then, I noticed a change in Lorelei's demeanor. She grew anxious whenever I didn't respond quickly. She'd nervously ask if I'd listened to her latest message, eyes wide, fingers fidgeting nervously with her cardigan sleeves. One evening, after dinner at Fire on the Mountain on Burnside, I decided I had to say something. We sat across from each other, half-eaten wings cooling between us while rain blurred the windows. I chose my words carefully, gently explaining that I enjoyed hearing from her, but didn't need so many detailed messages every day. Lorelei seemed fine, nodding quietly, saying she understood. "I'm sorry, Finn," she said softly. "I'll dial it back. I promise." I believed her. For a while, things seemed okay. The messages slowed, and our relationship briefly settled back into its comfortable rhythm. But a week or two later, I felt her pulling away. We saw each other less, and when we did, something felt strained. She spoke less, smiled less, her green eyes no longer lighting up when we met after work. At first, I assumed she just needed space. Maybe she was embarrassed or hurt. I gave her time, hoping she'd eventually come around. But then I started noticing strange things happening around my apartment near Laurelhurst Park. Books moved slightly out of place, missing notes for music lessons I'd prepared earlier in the week. Nothing big, just oddities. Then came the day everything changed. It was another cloudy afternoon. I returned home from teaching at Sunset Middle, expecting to find the usual quiet solitude of my apartment. Instead, when I opened the door, my chest tightened. The air felt oddly heavy, scented faintly of something metallic and burned. Cautiously, I stepped into my living room, shoes squeaking against the hardwood floor. My eyes immediately caught sight of scattered shards of black plastic littering the floor around my coffee table. My voice recorder, something I'd used for song ideas and recording student practice, lay crushed and shattered. The knot in my stomach tightened. My heart beat erratically as I knelt down to inspect the damage. Beside the recorder, a tangled mess of magnetic audio tape spilled out, twisted and torn beyond repair. Lorelei had been here. Somehow, I knew it instinctively. My eyes darted around, searching for more clues. Nothing else appeared damaged. But why destroy my recorder? Shaken, I reached for my phone, dialing Lorelei's number, but her line went straight to voicemail, ironic considering our recent struggles. I left several texts, asking her if she knew anything about it, but my messages stayed unread. The following morning at school, I waited anxiously in the teacher's lounge, hoping Lorelei would appear to explain herself. But she never came. When I finally went down to the library during lunch break, another librarian stood behind her desk. "Lorelei called in sick," the woman explained. She hadn't been answering calls since yesterday. Days passed. Lorelei didn't return to school, didn't respond to any of my messages. I drove by her apartment near Mississippi Avenue several times, knocking on her door. No answer. Her neighbors said they hadn't seen her in days. Lorelei had disappeared. A sickening dread settled over me. I couldn't sleep, haunted by the image of my shattered recorder and the spilled tape. The apartment no longer felt safe, and each passing day without explanation increased my unease. Weeks turned into months, and slowly, life at Sunset Middle settled back into its routine. The faculty assumed Lorelei had simply decided to leave abruptly, though no one knew why. But I couldn't move on. The unanswered questions lingered, consuming me. Late one autumn evening, as leaves blanketed Laurelhurst Park, I sat alone in my living room, drinking coffee and watching rain run down the windows. My phone buzzed, startling me. A voicemail notification flashed on screen, an unknown number from Duluth, Minnesota. Hands shaking, I pressed play. Lorelei's familiar voice flooded the room, soft yet unsteady, speaking from somewhere far away. "I'm sorry, Finn," she whispered. "I never meant to scare you. But I needed you to understand. All those messages, they weren't just words. They were pieces of me. I destroyed the recorder because I couldn't bear knowing my voice meant so little to you. It's better this way. Please, just forget me." The voicemail ended abruptly, leaving the room filled with silence. My heart raced, pounding painfully in my chest. It had always been more than just messages. Those were pieces of Lorelei, fragments she'd trusted me with. Yet, in trying to preserve myself, I'd unknowingly broken her trust.